Welcome back. I want to do a quick little recap of some corrected information that I found out on the Steel Beast forum after some of the more experienced guys looked at the tutorial that I put together. I had talked earlier in the map editor about the coordinates that you can see down here in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen when you're actually on the map. And I had indicated that the first lines were Steel Beast grid coordinates. And actually what they are UTM coordinates. I had also indicated that these maps were derived from GPS data. That's actually not right either, and I knew that. I just misspoke. It's actually GIS data that's used to create these maps. All right, let's switch back real quickly now to the mission editor. And I found out an additional piece of information about the mission editor. In the last session, we talked a bit about using this boundary box that you can see here flashing on the screen as the method that you use to select the region of the map you want to work with. An additional piece of information came to light during our discussion on the forum, and it's important, I think, to know, although probably it won't come into play all that often. But if you're using the Pro PE version of the software, the consumer version, there's actually a size limit on this box of 22 kilometers per side. And it's also worth noting, which I did not do in the previous session, that each of the grid squares that you see on the map are 1 kilometer grid squares. In this section of the video, we're going to just lay down some units for each side. Since this is going to be a relatively balanced meeting engagement, we'll want to keep the force mix pretty much the same on both sides. It won't be identical, obviously. So in the blue side, we know blue force is going to be coming down from the northeast, so somewhere up around, right about here. We'll go ahead and just do a right click, do new unit, tank, and we're going to give them the usual M1A1. The software is going to offer Company A, Platoon 1, with 4 vehicles, and that's okay, so we'll take that. We'll go ahead and repeat the same thing. And this time you'll notice it's going to be Platoon 2. It knows which numbers have been used. Again, 4 vehicles in the platoon, so that's okay. And then to keep it interesting, we'll give ourselves some infantry in the form of a personnel carrier. So in this case, we'll do PC instead of tank, and we'll use the M2A2. Again, it's the 3rd platoon, 4 vehicles, so we're okay. And then perhaps we want a commander vehicle. So let's right-click there again, do new unit tank, M1A1, and this time we're going to call them just CO. You notice that CO automatically goes to platoon size 1 and you cannot change it. So you just have to live with it. And obviously it's just a single vehicle. Okay. So there's our blue force up here in the corner. Now in order to do the same thing for red force, we have to flip this little toggle switch over here in the upper right corner from blue force to red force. When we do that, the blue units disappear temporarily. And we can come down here on the map and add some red forces. So again, we'll do new unit tank. In this case, we're going to do Leopard 2A4 as being roughly equivalent to an M1A1. And again, we'll leave it as A platoon 1. But notice on the Leopards, it defaults to a platoon size of 3. So we're going to want to change that to 4 to keep things even. All right, we'll repeat the same thing again for platoon number 2. Again, changing the quantity to 4. And we will likewise add our personnel carrier. And in this case, we'll use a CV9040B. Okay, and once again, quantity 4. Okay, let's add a CO tank. Leopard 2A4 Commander. All right, so now we have force structures for both sides. Obviously, these units aren't smart enough to do anything yet, but we'll get to that a little later. For now, though, we want to think about where do we want the player to be able to deploy these units. If we just leave them like this, the player can basically deploy them anywhere, which obviously wouldn't be much fun because everybody would deploy right on the bridge, and a massive firefight would ensue, and whoever shot fastest would win. Not much in the way of tactics or strategy there. So we're going to want to limit where players can put this stuff. So let's just click down here, go to New Graphic, and draw a rectangle. All right, let's if you click that rectangle, it's going to turn purple like that. And if you hold on the border, you can move the rectangle around. Let's make it about the size of one of these terrain squares, so about 1 kilometer. So we grab each one of the pink handles. Okay, you have to get it right on the square. Then you can kind of stretch it, and you can also rotate it, notice. So we'll make it kind of maybe long and just a little bit wide. And again, if we just grab it by the border, then we can move it around a little bit. So we'll set it up maybe something like this. Now we want to make sure that we get all of the units inside it. All right. And now let's click on the border again to highlight it. And now if you right click on it, you can say deployment zone. Okay, and once you do that, the units that are inside it cannot be deployed outside of it. Now, since this is the red zone, you can also right click on the border and do set color red. Just something I like to do. It doesn't affect the game in any way, and it's by no means mandatory. But now if you click off it, you'll notice that it's a red box instead of a black box. So now we'll do the same thing for blue. We're going to flip the toggle up here to go back to the blue forces. And we're going to draw a similar size box around the blue force. So again, we'll highlight the border, drag it about roughly where we want it, grab one of the pink handles, which can sometimes be a little tricky, and if necessary, you can just zoom in a little to get a better view of it. But we'll grab this one over here this time and rotate it and stretch it out a little bit. Okay, we'll grab it by the border, move it down just a little. So something like that. And then once again, make sure all of the units are inside the box. Doesn't matter where they are, because you can let the player do that. If he wants to set them up in a particular order, we just want to make sure they're inside. Again, if we highlight it and right click, we can do set color blue, and we can go and turn on the deployment zone attribute. All right, so now we've got 2 deployment zones that the player must deploy within. He cannot move outside of them. We should also take a moment now to talk about how deployment zones actually work. As I said, the blue player, for example, in this case, is limited to deploying his units within this deployment zone. If there were no deployment zone, for example, as we had earlier, the blue player would not be able to move his units at all. They would have to start where they had been placed. Now, this might be useful in some cases, but it does tend to limit the player's flexibility a little. The other scenario that you can have is when a side has more than one deployment box. So, for example, if blue had a deployment zone, say, down in the southern area, perhaps down around here, by right-clicking on the unit, there would be an option here called Move This To, and you would then be able to click within the other deployment zone, and it would allow the unit to move between the 2 zones. Blue still does not have the flexibility to put it anywhere else on the map, but he can put it in either of the 2 deployment zones. So there are some nice capabilities available by using multiple deployment zones. In this scenario, however, we're just going to stick with the simple 1 zone per side. While we're at it, we might as well create one more region. So let's go ahead and zoom this in so we can see our 2 bridges here. Okay, and I'll recenter the map. And let's put a rectangle around these. All right, so you notice when it's zoomed in, it's a little easier to work with. So we'll kind of roughly center it there, and then grab the pink handles Yeah, make it something like that, probably a little narrower. So perhaps something like that. Um, while it's selected, we'll go ahead and set it to green. I like to use green for my objectives, at least when there's just one of them. Other than that, you can use whatever colors you like. Notice though that there is also a transparent choice. So if you needed a region but you don't want the players to know where it is, you can set transparent and then you can only see it in the editor. You will not see it in the game. Notice that there's a gray area here within any rectangle that you create, any region basically. If I click on it, I'm going to get a text cursor, and maybe I want to call this Objective Alpha. Okay, I could say Objective 1, but Alpha sounds more military. And then if I right click on it again, you'll notice that I have an option to rotate the text. So let's say I want to rotate it 90 degrees. And if I then hold within the gray area, I can then move it and have it off to the side rather than right over top of the terrain feature. Okay, now if I click off of that, or actually before I do that, I want to right click on it and do set text color to green. All right, now if I click off it, you can see I have a nice green box with Objective Alpha on it. Now, in order for red to know about this, I would have to draw the same box over on the red side of the map. But rather than do that, the easiest way to do it is to do a right click on it. Oops, and I missed it. Okay, do a right click on it and copy to other side. Nice thing about that is that you know it's in exactly the same place and it's exactly the same size. So now if I come up here to the toggle switch and switch over to the red map, you'll notice that Objective Alpha is still there. All right, so both sides now have the objective. Each side has its force structure. Okay, if we zoom back out, we'll see the red forces down there in their deployment area. Objective Alpha is visible in the center. If we click to the blue forces, the same thing. So now we want to go ahead and do a save here to save our work. So I'm going to do File Save, and I'm just going to call it Tutor 1. All right, at this point the mission's been saved, so in case something happens, we won't lose all the work we've done. That's it for this time. Please keep an eye out for episode 3, in which we'll continue with some region work, adding some penalty zones to keep the players honest. And then we'll get down into the nitty-gritty of the scenario as we try to lay out the logic for the red units to give them enough intelligence to combat blue, who will be our human player. So we'll see you then.